And welcome to Region X Radio, right here on regionxradio.com. I am your host, Robert Bruce, along with the other host, Cindy Brown. Welcome, guys, and welcome.
Welcome to you.
Welcome to you. And, another good show today. We have David from the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. Oppenheimer Ranch, is it Oppenheimer? Well, the website is threecanyons.org. And, without further ado, any kind of, what happens if I start talking too much?
I know. Just get him on here.
I know.
Do your job.
Let me bring him in here. Welcome, sir. How are you doing today? Oh.
Excellent. Yourself?
Very good. Very good. Sorry about that. I didn't have your channel turned up, and I didn't hear you. What'd you say?
I said I'm doing excellent. Yourself?
Very good. Very good. Thanks for coming on the show. The other host here, Cindy Brown, she turned me on to your stuff. She's got me into looking at a lot of this grand solar minimum and everything, and fascinating work you do, sir.
Well, thank you. It's the first time I've heard of your radio program, but I'm happy to be here and happy to answer any of your questions.
Cool. So you're in the Colorado area, right?
Southwest Colorado, Four Corners, Pagosa Springs.
Okay.
Yeah, he probably hasn't heard of us because we just started.
Yeah, we just
a few months ago.
Yeah, we've both been doing this for quite a few years, and this is a new incarnation of what we have going on.
And the FEMA Region 10, where would that be?
That would be Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Alaska.
Okay, so the Pacific Northwest and Alaska.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha.
So I was watching some of your videos today. I was going through. You were talking about timelines. Well, I'm forgetting my manners here. Introduce yourself to the audience and to those that haven't heard you, and tell them what you're all about and your research and the work you do out there.
Well, first of all, please call me Diamond, and it's a nickname I've had since high school, so people don't refer to me as David, but my Christian name, as they say, is David Mariello. I was formerly trained in academia as a geologist as an undergraduate. I got into paleoclimatology at Temple University. I studied ice age geology. I was working as a stratigrapher and an invertebrate paleontologist in academia and teaching at the undergraduate and graduate level for several years, doing a lot of field research. And what I got to see was this really pervasive paleogeographic cycle everywhere in the entire country. And then even when I traveled the world, this cycle was in all sedimentary basins, had been going on for hundreds of millions of years, and had a periodicity of about 25,000 years. And the professors I was working on had attributed that cycle to the Milankovitch cycles, which are Mahmud Milankovitch in the 40s calculated the orbital perturbations of our solar system, specifically what the Earth does in its orbit and its axial plane. So the rotational plane of our planet wobbles like a top, and that would be referred to as the precession of the equinoxes. This is what the ancients saw as the rotational pole carved a circle in the sky, the heavens. It's a very ancient signal, and in order to witness this has to be information that had been gathered for thousands of years by the ancients. So by combining kind of modern geology and mythology, you can start to come to a consensus of the amount of information we know in science is very limited. Many people think that, modern civilization began in Mesopotamia just a few thousand years ago, and that's where farming began. But as mainstream uncovers things like Göbekli Tepe, and we have alternative scientists or citizen scientists doing their own research, we're finding more information that societies have been around for maybe hundreds of thousands of years, and we're either the information is suppressed or the masses are just too stupid to see it. So in the last several decades, all of this information has been building to today, which is the Oppenheimer Ranch Project and the YouTube channel that you're watching. So I got into activism about a decade ago, and it led us to creating this permaculture farm in the wilderness, off-grid, self-sustaining, because as scientists, we both believe that in a very short period of time, this society, the modern society we call modern times, is going to end. Because historically, at about 1100-year periodicity, if you look at the GISP-2 ice cores and you lay that onto historical documents, you're going to find every 1100 years there's a peak civilization, and then it completely disappears. For example, we're in what's called the modern warm, and that's our civilization right now, the empire model, whatever you want to call it, which is now devolving into crony capitalism, and the majority of the population is poor. The 1100 years ago was the medieval warm, and that's when the Vikings settled Newfoundland. And since then, we've had the Little Ice Age, which is the grand minimum in between. 1,000 years before that was the Roman warm, 1,000 years before that the Minoan warm. And in between all these periods are dark ages, where it's very difficult to live and populations dwindle, volcanoes erupt, and there's very little information. So based on all this building information, I thought it was imperative to be educating the public, because very few scientists in my position can be telling the truth with an unbiased point of view, because they're trying to hold on to their 401k, or they have this, that, and the other to worry about. And I don't have anything to worry about except the truth getting out there. So I was a little long-winded, but I hope that helps.
No, I love your mode of research. The fact of putting modern science, mixing that together with the whole idea of what the ancients saw, what was going on. Because this is what I find with modern day science. Modern day science tends to be the way the masses look at it, as they're the end all be all, and there's nothing else. So, and they don't want to look past their own noses to see what you're doing, actually meshing these things together and coming up with answers.
Right, and it's blatantly obvious. I mean, this global warming hypothesis, which is nonsense, all of the predictions have failed for 30 years. At some point, if you were doing real science, you would come up with a new model, and they failed to do that. It's a very non-scientific world we're living in that's driven by political ends, as opposed to, it's very difficult to do pure science these days because you have to fund it yourself. And we know how little money the general public has.
Right.
Well, that's true, and that's true of any science, really. The medical field, vaccinations, GMOs. There's so many things in our world that we just are supposed to take their word for it, when their end result is a little different picture than what we think of as it would be. Theirs is to pad their pockets or have control. Who knows? Who knows what they're thinking? But I don't think they're thinking scientifically and truthfully.
Yeah, and the unfortunate reality is that the historical record shows a pattern of society collapse on a regular periodicity. We share the graph, the GISP-2, which is the Greenland Ice Core Project 2, cores overlaying with historical information. And you can see a direct correlation between the O-18 ratios, which is a proxy for temperature. So when the warm periods happened was when societies flourished. And they all collapsed due to a massive drop-off that is brought on by a major solar minimum called the grand minimum. And this is when the sun shuts down. And what happens is the Earth's defenses shut down at the same time and allow more cosmic rays to enter and pass through the Earth. This causes catastrophic volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, coupled with cooling, so it drives the cooling even faster down to a bottom. And the transition is the most catastrophic to humanity than any other time on Earth. So while you're in the ice age, it's not catastrophic. It's just cold for the whole time. Hence the little ice age. When you're in the warm, it's warm the whole time, and there's no catastrophes, and it's all fun, like today. But in the transition times, which we've already begun, there is a period of hundreds of years of chaos. And that is brought on by the cosmic ray flux, which rapidly increases. We see the volcanic uptick in the last 6 months. And tonight, I was just checking before the show, there are 4 volcanoes continuously erupting today, weren't even on the eruption list 4 months ago. So the facts are in. We're watching what we've predicted come true, and the next thing is a larger eruption, which will darken the skies and drop the temperature, coupled with a large earthquake, maybe New Madrid or somewhere on the Ring of Fire. It could be Cascadia, but Cascadia is long overdue for an M8.5 or greater, and it is also overdue for an M7.9 or greater. So those 2 earthquakes typically occur at these grand minimas. So the next few decades are going to be quite a ride for humanity.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about that Cascadia one since we live right here. I've always got the earthquake site up, and we're always watching it. It's kind of contagious. People that come over start watching it too, and yeah, we've had a couple today. But sometimes our only warning, if we don't feel the shaking, our only warning for earthquakes is online. People, they don't put it on the news like when Fukushima happened. I saw that online. I didn't hear about it anywhere. And so it was the middle of the night. I ran down and gassed up all my cars. And the last car I took down there, the gas station guy goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, there's an earthquake and I want to make sure all my cars are gassed up." And he said, "Where at?" And I said, over in Japan. And he came out and gave me my change and said, "I have family in the Philippines," and I just called him and they didn't hear anything about it. And he said, "Thank you very much." So, we depend upon each other for this kind of information. So it's great when people like you come on and know some things and can tell us about it. And I was wondering, you're the most energetic guy that I've seen when I'm watching this stuff. I get tired just watching your videos. You're jumping around and you're so excited. It's really great. But I see you. Oh, by the way, and I'm sorry about your rooster. I saw your little rooster story that you had to put him down because he got injured, and that was sad. That's hard to do with an animal. And you're just into so many projects. I'm not sure what all your specialties are. I think geology is really interesting, but I was wondering if you could speak any about like the polar flip and what relation that has.
Well, that's an unfortunate fact of the drop-down that we're going into as being unprecedented. Many people are unaware that, the solar science is settled in the sense that we know that we don't know, but we think that the sun is getting weaker, and everything is pointing to that. Every solar cycle since the last 2 have been weaker. The predictions just came in from the mainstream. I just came back from observing the Frontier Conference, where Lisa Upton, who is one of the top plasma physicists in the country, in the world even, agrees with our prediction that solar cycle 25 is going to be at least 30% weaker than solar cycle 24, which means that the weather events we're seeing now are going to be increasing. They're not going to be, these are not unprecedented. This is just the beginning. So when you see 500-year floods twice in a year, that means the next cycle will bring 500-year floods 5 times in a year. So these events are unprecedented. Now you couple this with what you just brought up, the pole shift. Our magnetic field, the poles, have been completely steady and harmonious and have almost full strength starting just 100 years ago for thousands of years. We haven't had a polar excursion for about 11,500 years during the Younger Dryas event. And now we're in the middle of a pole flip. Now, the unique thing about this pole flip is the poles are not flipping on opposite sides of our planet. They are flipping towards the same side, and they're going to meet west of Indonesia sometime if everything continues to go at the same rate of increase as it has been in about 3 decades. As early as 2035, the poles could meet off west of Indonesia, and the long date would be 2050. But between 2035 and 2050, the poles should be at the equator. This has never happened since the last ice age, and the Younger Dryas warming, sea levels rose 400 feet, and then the mammoths instantly froze with food in their mouth, and then the sea level dropped again, and then it came back up another 150 feet. So those catastrophic events on the upswing of that part of the cycle, we are now going to experience the opposite because we're at the downswing. So halfway through the precessional cycle, the 25,000-year cycle, we're on the sea level fall surface. So the end of the ice age, as many call it, 11,500 years ago, was the sea level rise, where sea level came up 400 feet. And we're on the sea level fall surface as we descend into the ice age. Cosmic ray flux, cloud nucleation, continuous flooding rains lock up all the moisture on the land, and the oceans quickly drop. And now this is happening when the pole is shifting. So we are in unprecedented territory. As the poles shift towards 2035 to 2050 and they meet at Indonesia, the magnetosphere could drop, and we know this by historical data, as low as 5 to 10%, and that would allow for satellites potentially to fall to Earth by the millions, just re-enter, cosmic debris to come in. No one knows. So this is all going to happen in our lifetime, and it's going to be a wild ride.
Wow. I've never heard any of this. That's amazing. So this is a magnetic flip, though, crazy, or I call him Crazy because that's our old nicknames. He used to be Crazy Wolf, so. But Bruce and I were talking about it, and, he was saying it's not the same thing as a physical pole shift. And that seems to be true, but when the poles meet, you mean our North Pole and South Pole will be right together, and will that actually make an equator somewhere, and will it actually act like a regular pole? Will the poles be a cold spot? I really don't quite get that.
So the Earth there has been no evidence ever of a rotational pole flip. That would mean that the planet itself gets flipped upside down. And that, first of all, doesn't make any sense. And if it were to happen, everything would be destroyed instantly. Just simply because of the centrifugal force, centripetal, the gravitational pull, everything that's keeping us together where we don't feel us moving, actually, that would all end. So it would be like hitting the wall at 1,600 miles an hour. If that were to happen, and there's no geologic evidence that there was ever a pole flip. And a lot of people are confused out in the general public of the difference between the rotational pole and the magnetic pole. They're independent. And the Earth is a spinning top. The precession is the wobble. So what you have is an electromagnet spinning in a field. The universe is electric. It's electrically charged, connected by Birkeland currents. And you have this magnetic ball called the Earth spinning and creating its own magnetic field. These form poles that wander around the rotational pole. So up near the North Pole is where the magnetic North Pole should be. In fact, it usually is up there. It has been for 11,500 years. And it moves around. It never stays still. And actually, if you have a compass and you're an orienteer and you use your compass regularly, the position of the North Pole moves every year several degrees back and forth because the Earth spins once every year. So wherever the pole is, that makes a circle up there in the north. If you're following me, that magnetic pole through time every year slowly moves. And every year we can get, after it makes one circle, we can figure out where it is. The poles recently started shifting the last 30 years, and as they shift, as the magnetosphere wanes towards zero and they meet, they'll pass each other and then show up on the opposite sides of the Earth, where positive will be negative and negative will be positive The rotational pole will be the same. So what will happen when they pass by each other, at that moment, water will not drain down a sink in a swirl. It will go straight down for that moment. Whereas it goes clockwise on one hemisphere now and counterclockwise on the other, that will flip. So everyone might be tripped out. The toilet bowl will flush the opposite direction after the pole shift. And that's based on the electromagnetic dynamics of our Earth. Is your mind blown?
Well, I had heard that part, so we're going to be like Australia as far as flushing our toilet, basically. And yes, my mind is blown. Okay, is that going to affect the temperature, where the magnetic pole is? Is that going to be cooler? That's the part I don't get.
No, the magnetic poles are really unrelated to anything.
Okay.
But what happens when they flip is the magnetosphere is weakened. That's going to allow the Earth to be bombarded by cosmic rays, which are going to cause massive mutations in humans and other animals. It's going to change our seeds and our crops. And it's unprecedented territory. No one knows what happens in these thresholds. We do know from 3 thresholds ago, 54,000 years ago, that the population dropped to very low numbers. And even recently at the Younger Dryas event, there were hundreds of millions of Clovis people all over North America, and they disappeared instantly. Gone. Not even one.
It's, you being a geologist, I know some about the Clovis people. You being a geologist, I have seen documentaries where they show a certain level, a certain level in the rock where they were, and they say perhaps a lot of geological upheaval, volcanoes, so forth and so on.
Yeah, exactly above the surface of Clovis is the black mats. So the black mats now have been correlated all around the northern hemisphere, and they represent a black layer that could be telling us that the entire forests of all of the northern hemisphere were obliterated in a single event and now consist of one burnt black mat. This black mat, until just this decade, was only thought to be local in North America, and then the correlation started spreading. It is all the way around through Siberia and all of Russia and everywhere on the globe. And what it suggests, because in the black mat there are microspherules, nanodiamonds, and other cosmogenic things, that there was a massive cometary impact with multiple events that didn't necessarily have to hit the Earth. That is an old model. So these objects could hit the ice sheet up there during the peak Wisconsinian glacial period, which peaked 16,000 years ago. But we're talking 12,900 years ago. A major object might have entered, broken up into lots of pieces. And what we know now from plasma physics, the electric universe model, is that, and we've even witnessed it as humans in the last 100 years, when large objects come in at an angle to the planet with an opposite charge, there's a massive lightning strike, a plasma discharge event, which vaporizes the object. It happened above Tunguska in 1906. It happened above the same area just 4 years ago in Russia. And we've had another one just this winter and last year. Large objects that get vaporized above the surface. Now, picture these objects being 10,000 times bigger and the lightning 10,000 times larger, and there being thousands of them. So they would all be vaporized. There would be no impact craters, but there would be massive amounts of plasma discharge in the northern hemisphere, lighting all the forests on fire and creating these black mats, nanodiamonds, and other cosmogenic dusts.
Diamond,
So we could be... Yeah,
hold your thought. We'll be right back here in just a few minutes. Hang in there, guys. We'll be right back here in just a few minutes with Diamond from the Oppenheimer Project. Hang in there.
With SRN News, I'm Keith Peters in Washington. President Trump has delivered on a major campaign promise by taking steps to impose tariffs on some foreign imports.
Surrounded by steel workers, the president signed proclamations to slap 25% tariffs on steel imports and 10% tariffs on imported aluminum. He said he made the move because American workers have been betrayed.
But that betrayal is now over.
And the president argued that the U.S. is simply seeking a level playing field.
We just want fairness.
There will be exemptions for Canada and Mexico, among some other countries. Greg Clugston, the White House.
Not all Republicans are on board, however. Senator Ben Sasse told CBS this morning tariffs are a terrible idea.
It doesn't make sense of where we are in economic history. Tariffs always hurt us. Ultimately, nobody ever wins a trade war. Both sides lose a trade war. Trade is indisputably good for America. It's good for consumers on both sides of every trading relationship.
Britain's top domestic security official on Thursday described the attack on a former Russian spy and his daughter with a rare chemical agent as a brazen and reckless act that will be answered without hesitation when the facts become clear. Correspondent Charles de Ledesma reports British Home Secretary Amber Rudd says the probe into the nerve agent attack on the Russian ex-spy and his daughter is focusing on a number of locations, his home, a pub, and a restaurant.
Rudd says enormous resources are being directed at trying to figure out who may be responsible for the poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter. Rudd won't say if she believes Russia's behind the alleged attack, but says Britain will, if it is appropriate, attribute it to somebody.
The pair was found unconscious on a bench in the southwestern English city of Salisbury on Sunday, triggering a police investigation led by counterterrorism detectives. On Wall Street, the Dow by 94 points to 24,895. The Nasdaq rose 31. The S&P advanced 12. This is SRN News. An Idaho judge says transgender people have a right to change their birth certificates.
Up to now, state officials have refused to alter the legal birth certificates of people who have decided to live as the opposite sex. But Idaho Magistrate Judge Candy Dale has ruled that the state must allow the alterations, saying, quote, a birth certificate with a listed sex that aligns with an individual's gender identity promotes the health, well-being, and safety of transgender people. Michael Harrington, SRN News.
Evangelical Christians are playing a major role in supporting Jewish immigration to Israel. According to a tally by the Associated Press, Israel's Christian allies now fund about a third of all immigrants moving to the country. Israeli charities raise millions of dollars from Christians around the world every year, and evangelicals make up 13% of all tourists to Israel. An Israeli parliamentary caucus works with Christian legislators in many nations to foster support for the Jewish state. This is SRN News. The second powerful snowstorm in a week has clobbered the Northeast.
Parts of New Jersey, New York, and New England got 2 feet of snow and more. The Weather Service's Mark Chenard.
The greatest that I've seen so far is a report in southern Vermont of 33 inches.
Philadelphia got 6 inches. Central Park in New York got less than 3. The storm knocked out power for hundreds of thousands of people. Thousands of airline flights were canceled, train service disrupted, but, says Frank Mullen in Providence, Rhode Island,
it's amazing. It's beautiful. I had to come out and stop and check it out. Loving it.
He talked to WPRI-TV in Providence. I'm Rita Foley.
Health insurer Cigna will spend about $52 billion to acquire Express Scripts, the nation's biggest pharmacy benefit manager. The deal's expected to close at the end of this year. It's the latest in a string of proposed tie-ups as healthcare's bill payers look to grow and gain better leverage to deal with rising costs. More details at srnnews.com. I'm Keith Peters in Washington.
Region X Radio.
And we are back here on RegionXRadio.com with our guest today, Diamond from the Oppenheimer Project. Sir, I'm sorry about the break cutting you off right there, because this is absolutely a fascinating thing for me, because I've looked into, I'm sure not with you being a geologist, not on the level that you have, but the Clovis people, and how, yes, there is evidence that these guys they were gone. and the whole idea of the black mat. And you were talking about the plasma discharges of when these big objects come in. This is fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that the area that we're in here, where I'm living, the Four Corners area, and a lot of the desertification around the Northern Hemisphere, including the Sahara Desert, there are some very unique objects in the Sahara, an area called the Eye of the Sahara, which is this concentric circle ring, which is a geologic feature that's unexplainable. Most of these unexplainable circular features are attributed to salt doming, because if you get a salt dome, it can push up the sedimentary rocks to appear like a blister or a zit on the earth, so that the layers look like rings as they get pushed up. The unfortunate thing is these areas are also geochemically altered. And what is missing from the geologic toolbox, we have ways to explain events when we go out in the field as field geologists. What is not taught and is in none of the geologic textbooks is plasma discharge as a way to, in fact, scour out large amounts of earth that are missing that we can't account for. Like the Grand Canyon is missing lots of sediment that should be in the Gulf of Mexico, and the Gulf of Mexico should be filled up. There should be no water in there. It should be filled with sediment, but it's not there. So geologists just say, oh, it's missing sediment, which is impossible. Where did it go? Did people take it? But we have people like Billy Yelverton, who is Mr. Too Tough on YouTube, doing high voltage plasma discharge experiments in his garage, where he can scour out landscapes using 80,000 volts and clay layers. He's recreating geologic features that mimic Zion and Bryce Canyon, the Grand Canyon, and a lot of the desert Southwest that the normal geologic toolbox would attribute to ventification, which is wind-driven sand scouring out all these unique features. I really think it's electricity, and there is even historical information from ancient cultures. And I live here near the Hopi culture and the Anasazi, and they witnessed rivers of fire. Now, these scour out canyons, so like the Black Canyon or the Grand Canyon. I believe that the natives were seeing plasma discharge events. When they hit the ground, the lightning then goes laterally, and it forms a pattern that's dendritic. And all of these major missing sedimentary features, like the Grand Canyon, are dendritic features. So in essence, the Grand Canyon could have been formed 11,500 years ago when a large cometary body discharged with Earth when it was in close proximity. We're talking amounts of electricity that anyone in the area would immediately be vaporized. Some people at the right altitude could have witnessed it and have been safe. And I think that that's, in fact, what happened in the past during Clovis times. And I've been searching for evidence of Clovis everywhere I go in North America, and I find it everywhere I go. So I'm a pretty good archaeologist. I know where to look for this type of debris. And it appears that the Clovis civilization, there were millions of people all over North America. Everywhere there was a river, everywhere I've looked, I've been able to find Ice Age shards, in fact, Clovis points, everywhere I look. And in fact, I found Clovis points here up at around 9,000 feet up on the Oppenheimer Ranch itself, which is where Frank Oppenheimer actually was a rancher after he created the atomic bomb. We actually owned the property he ranched, which is why we named it the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. And amazingly enough, right there where we pulled up our trailer, there was we found a Clovis point within a few months.
Wow. I've found seashells on the top of just about every mountain or range that I've ever been on, but I never thought about Indian arrowheads or Clovis heads.
Well, the shells you're probably finding are fossils and not actual seashells.
That's right. Yeah. They are fossilized.
Yeah.
So you were talking about an 1,100-year cycle, and you looking into ancient times. Do you think that there's Do you think during, you were talking about the dark age, you have these heating periods and there's a dark age. Do you think that there is a lot of superstition that accompanies these things?
Oh, I mean, it is known and proven. So all the witches were burned during the Maunder Minimum. They blamed the absence of the sun and crop failures on pestilence. So it almost seems like nothing has changed, right? There's still religious zealots today that think that major storms are caused by all the gay people. So I don't think that anything's changed, whether we're in a maximum or a minimum. There's still insane people that want to, burn the witches. But what does increase during these minimums is that's information we know happened, like the burning of the witches. But the eating of people and the darkest, deepest, the darkest secrets are probably not passed on. And these are time periods when, huge portions of the population die. 30% or more of the population in your area perish from starvation. And so it has to be a horrible period to be alive in.
It's the things that zombie movies are made from, it sounds like.
But obviously you have hope that human beings are going to be able to survive this, and that's what you're working on, is surviving such an incident.
Well, I believe through my studies that humans at the intellect that we are now have existed maybe for 360,000 years. Now, I'm not saying that because I believe that we're at a pretty dark age here. There was no time in history that humans ever put their trash in giant holes in the earth in billions of ton areas. And there were times on Earth when there were millions of humans. So humans have gotten dumber as technology has increased. We're not getting smarter. I believe that the societies that lived hundreds of thousands of years ago, the ones that built the pyramids and Machu Picchu and some of those megalithic areas, or the foundations that were rebuilt on, I believe those civilizations were far more advanced than we are today. And we've survived, for 500,000 years. And some of the events in the last 500,000 years, we have geologic evidence, are crazy. Just 12,000 years ago, 70% of all land mammals perished in a mass extinction that almost no one is taught in school. That's very recently that we had a mass extinction, but you're led to believe that everything's fine and weather's supposed to be this temperature, which is all nonsense. The CO2 nonsense is so nonsensical. Geologically, the last 1,000,000 years have been the lowest CO2 concentration in geologic history. The average CO2 is 2,000 or greater parts per million, and they're claiming that if we hit 450, we're all going to die. It's nonsense. If we hit 2,000 next year, the forests would bloom like we've never seen before. So the whole false narrative and disinformation that's happening right now through the mass media, which is owned by 6 multinational corporations, is mind-boggling.
I don't think there is a lot of truth that comes through there, and I think we're proven that's proven to us almost every day when we find out things like this are happening. I've always been interested in home skills and preserving that part of our culture because I think that's how people have survived for difficult times in the past. And I was just floored when I found out anything about the Ice Age because it kind of encompassed everything you'd ever have to prepare for right there, because everything can happen during it.
Well, the false narrative is that we're not in an ice age. We've been in an ice age for over 1,000,000 years. Very limited times within that 1,000,000 years have been warm. And if you go look at the GISP-2 ice core, you'll see these major peaks. These are the only times societies have flourished. For a geologic instant, we call it. A few thousand years is a geologic instant. A few hundred years is a literal instant. So the Roman warm was just a few hundred years. And the medieval warm was just a few hundred years. And our modern warm just began back in 1800, a few hundred years.
Hey, Diamond.
Yo, go ahead.
You're breaking up real bad.
I apologize.
Oh no, I wasn't sure if didn't sure if it was on your end or my end.
I'm on a cordless phone and on a.
He's on a cordless phone. I heard that much.
Let's pick up the other side. Full charge, so we should. Can you hear me now?
No, it's very spacey,
Really choppy.
really choppy.
No.
Technology. Oh, he should call. He's probably calling back in.
Okay. Okay.
So we'll get him when he comes back in. But sorry for the listeners on that. You know, this is.
It happens.
Hey, this is what happens when we do these things ourselves. We without the big studio and stuff like that. But please, Diamond, call back in, sir. Sorry about the connection issue there. But yeah, that's always the whole Clovis thing. I've heard about that for years and years. I've saw specials on this, and it's really fascinating. Here we go. We have him back. Are you there, sir?
I'm back. Can you hear me now?
It's slightly choppy, but it's more fluid.
Oh, you began breaking up there as well. So maybe we can get back to the conversation and we see how the connection is.
Okay. Go ahead. Okay. Well, I was saying that the idea of the Clovis, it's been a real fascinating subject with me. And I grew up in the North Georgia area, and there's a lot of old, ancient. I remember hiking around on the Appalachian Trail, and there's even some gated off places with some. If I'm not mistaken, they go back to that period or a little bit after or before. It's some fascinating things that they have up in there with a lot of the ancient cultures and how they just disappeared.
Let me tell you this interesting story. I found a small cave just outside of Philadelphia, and I went in with a friend of mine. I mean, like a slot, 2 feet wide, 4 feet high, 20 feet. And we excavated the floor, and the first thing we found was the Clovis point. It was perfect. Now, what the Clovis did was leave caches everywhere, and it was an actual Clovis point for hunting. So this was left in the cave so to come back and use it if he was hunting and he needed a new arrowhead. But the most intriguing thing that they were able to manufacture these points, which can be replicated today. I the central flake, which is difficult to replicate. No one knows how they did it in that. It's more bizarre. There's these caches in the area.
Hey, Diamond. Sir, I'm sorry you're breaking up real bad. I tell you what, I'm going to. I'm pretty sure it's probably my phone line service. If you give me 1 second, if you hang up, give me 1 second, I will call you back directly, and so we don't have this problem. I do apologize about this. All right.
Yeah, we just changed that today. We thought it was an upgrade. Things happen.
Things happen. Except I'm pretty sure I got the right number here. Let's see if.
Let's hope you've got the right number, because goodness knows who you might call. There we go.
There we go. Yep, technology. It's a crazy thing.
Hello there.
That's so much better. I want to apologize to you. It's a little technological glitch on our side with our phone lines, but this will work much better.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Oh, yeah, he sounds good.
So you were talking about until we entered into watery land. You were talking about a cave, and you were talking about the size of this cave you were crawling up into.
Oh, my. Okay, so we went into this cave, a friend of mine, outside of Philadelphia, and we did a small excavation. And we found, the first thing we found was a perfect Clovis point. It was it had even some calcification from the cave on it because it had a Clovis point. Is we're talking this particular one looked to be about 11.9 in that realm, 12,000 years old. Perfect point. Now, the unique thing about the Clovis people is that they cached a lot of their hunting tools everywhere so that it could be, I think, used by anyone. They could just find these caches and use these points. But the most unique thing about the Clovis is that their bifacial technology is almost irreplicable. You can't do it today, and it's such a mystery. It gets even more insane that the Clovis people actually made scale models of their hunting implements to 10 times the scale at 1/4 the thickness. And archaeologists have no idea how to even begin to try to replicate what they were doing or what the purpose was. But I'm a full believer that this was the first or the oldest encyclopedia that we know of. And this was a gigantic scale model of their extremely intricate technology that we, modern humans, don't even know how to make their arrowheads today. So the Clovis people were far more advanced than anyone is aware. And I think that maybe they were caching these large-scale points because they knew that there was a cosmic catastrophe happening. And I think that the stone circles in Göbekli Tepe are also related to a cosmic clock and a warning system of cosmic catastrophe that no society has yet to carry on through the catastrophe. And if we have, it's in the basement of the Vatican.
Oh, I bet there's a lot of good stuff down there. I just want to be let loose so I can read stuff.
Things there might not be able to be unseen, though. Watch out.
That's true. Very good point. So, yeah, the Clovis were in Oregon, too, the Clovis Indians. There's a couple caves that they mentioned that they found different artifacts in, but they found different kinds of people in Oregon, so, maybe it's a space portal.
I think that a lot of that is fantasy land, and I think a lot of the conspiracy theories that are bolstered by who knows what, a lot of the disinformation is to create such a false narrative that no one knows what's up and down. And again, warning people about a coming cold period where we're going to eat our children, that wouldn't be a good thing to do either for any government anywhere in the world. So there's a lot of practical reasons why we're not being told, but there's a lot of covert things happening in our world that is really evil. And just the state of humanity and the fact that we're so separate as a species is disgusting. And the fact that in order to survive, you have to work as a slave for someone else for your entire life so that you maybe can retire is another false narrative that needs to end.
That's a travesty. I think that's the beginning of the end when the family is pulled away from the home.
Indeed.
To me, that's central to a good civilization and one that survives.
Yeah, we had a big catastrophe called the Depression, and the reason that humanity in North America and the United States survived is because we were still agrarian. We still were homesteaders. We still had gardens. We still took 50% of the food off our own land. We knew about that, and that has been lost globally. I mean, except for third world countries, we're talking about a techno society of babies that are incapable of tying their shoes. It's frightening.
No, I'm right with you on that. And my grandparents lived through the Depression, and they gardened just for fun, even when they didn't need to. And I think they said something like over 80% of people had little family farms, and that is how they made it, was growing their own food. And especially with more people today, it's like it's something that everybody needs to start to learn because there is a big learning curve to it. It isn't easy, and it especially isn't easy when times are a little more difficult, when the weather's cooler and there's so much rain and all of those other things going on across the world.
Yeah, so we have this humanity with a lack of skills that are practical for survival. and they're reliant on this technology, which is inedible. And the unfortunate thing about the event that we're heading into over your next lifetime is that it's going to cause grid failure. The grid is going to be down indefinitely at some point in the next decade. I don't give it more than 7 years, because as we come out of the solar minimum, this solar minimum from the current prediction from NASA and NOAA is expected to last through 2020. So the furthest they estimate out for sunspots is 2020, January 1st, and we still will not be in solar minimum at 2020 on January 1st. We're still descending into the minimum. Some sunspot cycles that are small or low amplitude, like in the Dalton minimum, last for up to 14 years, which means the next 3 years could be the most epic winters and catastrophic weather ever seen in the likes of which humanity, and we're going to witness it globally because we'll have the grid up, and we have YouTube, and we have great reporting. So the unfortunate thing, at some point when we come out of the solar minimum, the sun's going to be active again, and X flares come off of the sun every year. We know this. We have the periodicity. And when they start coming off the sun with our magnetosphere falling towards 40 and 30%, the grid is going to completely fry. There's no way to protect against it.
And I think that's a real fear that could happen any day now. I mean,
Yeah.
It's more likely to happen then, but it can happen now because it is weakening.
And the reality is that there'll be an uptick. As it starts to fry, it'll fry locally. They won't get it all up. Other areas will fry. It'll be a cascading effect. The effects of these descents into grand minimas, and the one we're going into is unprecedented, will be a cascading effect. No way to predict how the cascade unfolds. Will it be grid failure and then volcanic eruption with earthquake? Or will the New Madrid fault, and then as they're trying to repair the infrastructure, a year later the grid fries? It will be a cascading effect, and it will in no way to predict where it is. So preparing now is the way to survive in the future.
Well, I always say, people go, oh, why bother, because you're not going to make it anyway. But my biggest fear isn't not making it, it's making it and having nothing to survive on.
Well, it's just like Diamond said. It was talking about these things, these extinctions. Some people survive. Humanity, as you said, sir, you believe over 300,000 years old with all these calamities. Some of us have kept pushing forward.
Yeah, and it seems like the groups that end up having a good, solid core community that move into a cave or in a structure that's impenetrable. So you need to do this with a group of like-minded people that are preparing for the same thing, because you need to, in the end, in the aftermath, make people. So you need a good, viable group to make people from. And also, so I'm going to go into the woods as survivor man idea is a nightmare. Because, and especially being in a major population area, there are types of social unrest that you can eliminate by moving easily. If you're far enough away from a population center, no one can ever reach you. No one's walking there. They'll never survive that far. And if you're in a small enough population center, most of the people where I live were all prepared for anything. We had a landslide on our road last year, and a bunch of us didn't know we were blocked out for 2 days because no one left. It wasn't until the heavy equipment came by, we're like,
Bruce have been friends for years, something like that, and he just recently moved out here, and he's renting from us on our property, so we're gardening together and doing all that, and we're trying to do the relationship and the everything. Oh, we got a break. Talk to you when we get
cool.
back.
All right, guys, we'll be right back here in just a few minutes, right here on Reaching X Radio.
With SRNU.
And we're back here on Region X Radio. It's regionxradio.com. Tonight we have Diamond. Diamond, go to the website, guys. It's www.threecanyons.org. And let's bring it back in. Are you there, sir?
I am here.
All right. We still got a great connection. So what kind of activities do you have going on up there at the homestead? I guess I could be more pointed. What are you doing to prepare?
Well, we got out here 3 years ago, and unfortunately, the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, which you can find on YouTube at Oppenheimer Ranch Project, if you just put that in, we started up on Frank Oppenheimer's ranch. And the reason we bought the property, and it turns out, in retrospect, if you're looking for land to do what you want to do, first of all, you have to buy land that has no restrictions. It can't have a property owners association or anything, because that will be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak. So we ended up wasting a long portion of time. Over a year, I wasted preparing the land up in the original lot. Now, we still own that property because it has 35 acres of amazing timber, which we may need in the future, the wood there. And I have been selectively cutting some logs for the use in the sawmill down here. But we've moved down to Three Canyons Ranch, a little lower, and we are really preparing to have a kind of co-creative community here. We're listed on Hip Camp, where people can come and camp and see what we're doing. And we're also listed on the Worldwide Organization of Organic Farms, where people can travel around from farm to farm and share their sweat equity for knowledge and free food and lodging. We're not really at the level of lodging yet. We have a campsite. We're preparing to have probably 5 different types of greenhouses. I just finished the first geothermal greenhouse, which is connected to a sawmill. We're about to implement a 120-foot long solar greenhouse design by engineers that has a mushroom growing north room and is completely automated with CO2 enrichment. And this is coming from cutting-edge growing technology in China, where all of their food is produced locally and has similar cold climate to where I'm at. We're putting in over 12 kilowatts of solar. The land we have has access to glacial water via a river that comes right from the Continental Divide. There'll be multiple alternate wells, as well as cisterns. We have a fully biodynamic organic permaculture farm that is continuing to grow as we plant. You need to plant succession after succession every year for a decade until you're finished with the food forest. And we also do a traditional annual organic farm where we produce hundreds of pounds of summer squash, potatoes, and other cold weather crops that can make it in this particular environment, where last year we only had 73 days, frost-free days.
Wow, that's not very many. And
Nope.
we kind of look into that too. Being here, I'm always trying to look towards animal feed as well, and I like the food forest idea. And I don't have animals yet, but my brother-in-law down the road does. And researching it, I found that it's very difficult here to grow wheat on the coast because it's wet and it's cool. It's much like England, and I read that in England they didn't grow wheat; they mostly grew mangle beets to feed their cattle. And so I started practicing growing those, and I've been saving my own seed and giving it away to everybody so that everybody has some when that happens.
Yeah, I have a good supply of mango beet and bull's blood, which I'm going to try to grow this year outside. They're gigantic tubers, which can feed massive quantities. You can feed them to pigs if you cook them. Another thing I suggest is before the stuff hits the fan is you can figure out where a local granary is. They're called commodities brokers in this area, where they sell animal feed and seed to farmers. And because of the climate change effects of the grand solar minimum in the last year and a half, the wheat has been hardly hit. So the high bricks has been sold off as animal feed now. So you have hard red wheat that has flooded the market. There are billions of tons of it, which they're giving away here for $5 a 50-pound sack. This is bread flour, but it has a high enough nutrition that you can feed any animals solely on this wheat. A 50-pound bag that you soak in 5-gallon buckets and sprout becomes 250 pounds of food for $5. So there is an economical way to start stockpiling grain. This wheat will grow, and they also sell oats and other grains, including beet seeds. But finding a local commodities dealer where you can start stockpiling grains and seeds is a great way to start.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. They probably do that more inland, not on the coast here, but it's a consideration. I've been looking for some kind of a wholesale thing like that, and I have not found it yet. But it sounds like a great idea, and I like your idea about sprouting, because if you sprout it, you have at least 10 times more food and certainly much more nutrition than that. So it's an important skill.
And if you sprout and leave more than 2 inches of water on your grain, it'll start to ferment in a good way. So it not only sprouts, but it also ferments. So you have a biodynamic feed that is probiotic. It's an amazing way to be resourceful the way it used to be done. Gut bacteria, probiotics. This is why people are healthy in communities that they claim is unexplainable. It's because they have all the correct micronutrients in their diet. They have glacial water that supplies their food crops, and those micronutrients are taken up in the food. So you have highly nutritious foods if you supply the right probiotics, the right micronutrients.
I totally agree with that. I think that starts in your home and your kitchen, too. If you're using horrible chemicals to clean with, you're not going to have those good bacteria and things growing. So I like to make my own yeast, and I've been practicing fermenting things naturally, too. And I think as you do that, those good germs and things get out in your home, and it's easy to replicate that process if you're not contaminating your environment.
Absolutely.
Are you guys, so you're making this ranch. If something happens, are you going to be like in a cave or just blocked by mountains, or what's your plan here?
Well, historically, we researched the area, and the Southwest here is geologically inactive in this particular region. There has been no geologic volcanic activity for around 10 million years. We are also located nearby the deepest hydrothermal vent on Earth. The Pagosa Springs hot spring is the deepest hot spring in the world. So the geothermal energy that could be divided amongst the citizens is extremely high in the coming times. And so the resources around here also, it has the most natural wildlife. Almost everyone in the country knows of this area, and they drive here to come hunting because of the amount of elk. They come through here. Over 40 million migrate through the area. The population is extremely low. There's only 2,600 people for thousands of square miles. The nearest city is an hour west. It's called Durango, and it only has 10 or 20,000 people total. So it's a very safe area. The only way to get here from the East Coast is through Wolf Creek Pass, and there are songs written about it. No human could even walk across it, let alone make it to the bottom of it. So it's easy to separate ourselves from the rest of society if need be. We could just blow up Wolf Creek Pass and we'd be on our own. It has abundant natural resources that in the last Grand Minima, in the Maunder Minimum, became more hospitable to wildlife, and actually this desert area bloomed. So there are areas in the desert Southwest here that get more moist. There is catastrophic flooding in this area, but that's good if we can capture the water and eliminate drowning.
Exactly. That's kind of important.
But we love whitewater rafting. We have a Class 6 whitewater cataract, so we're ready to go, just like Noah in the flood. We just don't have 2 of every animal. We have 2 of every gun, though.
Yeah, perfect.
Indeed. I was checking out your this fascinating floor plan here for the Oppenheimer Earthship.
Yeah, now the Earthships in general are a great idea. Came out of Michael Reynolds, and then the idea quickly fell apart when he started charging people for the plans. Now, the problem with these earth ships is it's a great way to get free rear walls of a house in recycling tires, but they're usually damp and dank, and they don't really grow food. So what we've done, being scientists, Leah and I, and have background in the sciences, and I've done some of my early activism work 5 years ago was to do this vacant lot growing and gardening, because Philadelphia has the most vacant lots in any major city in the U.S., and these poor communities can grow food and really bolster their food supply. And we're going to all need to be doing this. So it's how I really got my roots back in growing food in communities. And we're all going to need to be growing this food in the coming times.
I think you're right. We really need to share that information as much as possible with each other. I think we all have our specific problems. For instance, here our ground is so wet. Right now it's just a giant mushy sponge. So we don't have very many basements. An partially underground sunken greenhouse is not going to cut it here. And it could destabilize land. We have enough of a problem with sliding and those kinds of things. So it's really about passive solar, placing your things right. And I try to figure out how you're going to replace things when nobody's making plastic anymore. You know, you're going to have to have a few skills to keep growing things. And mushrooms are definitely, this is mushroom heaven here. So that's on my list, my next to-do list. But except for the earthquakes and pretty much that, I mean, we're not even that close to any volcanoes necessarily. We could get ash. We did for Mount St. Helens, and we have the Cascade Range, and who knows, maybe the coastal range would act up, but I don't see that happening. We do, however, also have volcanoes right out in the ocean from here, and that's where we often have a little earthquake, but we haven't had a big one yet. But you know, we're pretty mild, and south of us was the Kalmiopsis, as I was talking about last night. It's in like southern Oregon and northern California, and it actually survived the last ice age. They had different bugs and everything there. Unfortunately, a lot of it burned last year when the whole West Coast pretty much was on fire. So, and we're like you. If anything happens here and there is an earthquake or something like that, we just got, 3 roads in, and 2 of them are actually just one road, and we're all connected by waterways. So it would be really easy to isolate ourselves from any big city dwellers, which are, even driving is at least 4 hours away. I don't think that the roads are going to hold up under any kind of a crisis situation here. So that won't really be a concern.
Yeah, well, let me get back to that the Earthship idea. There are structures that you can be considering. Like you just said, you were just mentioning passive solar and the orientation of buildings. That's critical for the future. You need to be south-facing, and you need to have most of your glazings on the south wall with almost no windows elsewhere. Best way to conserve energy. And also, you can be using the Earthship idea in new construction, stick construction, that maybe you overbuild by putting in thermal mass in the rear wall. And the front area, like we're going to be building, we have this giant barn, and we're including geothermal greenhouse structures on every building as passive solar storage capacity and heaters. So the climate battery idea has been around for decades, and it simply consists of insulating deep into the ground, laying tubes, and passively capturing the hot air from a greenhouse, forcing it underground for use later at night, passively as it leaks back up. And we have greenhouse designs that utilize this method that use solar energy and fans to take the hot air from the top of the roof and put it deep into the ground and save it for at night. The first geothermal greenhouse we've built is 14 degrees warmer than ambient. So we went from zone 5A to 8 in the first greenhouse we built. We're going to add thermal mass to the second greenhouse in the form of thousands of gallons of water, and we'll be able to take the temperature up 24 degrees to zone 12. And that design is going to also be attached to our tiny home construction shop, which is a 2-story barn that's 80 feet long. It's going to have a food-growing climate battery system on the entire length of the side wall. where we can grow food enough for about 50 people, and we can store enough heat to heat our home and our entire shop down to 40 below.
Wow, that's amazing. I have one question though. How are you going to run the fans? I mean, eventually, things break and they run out, and you can keep power on a battery, but batteries die. I mean, they don't live forever, right? So how are you going to manage that if the fans are essential to what you're doing?
Well, we have planned on stockpiling fans. Now, these are solid-state things that could get affected by EMP, but they'll be in Faraday cages. So there'll be backup fans. A lot of these fans have very long longevities, which will probably have enough to last our lifetime. If there is no power, we have multiple alternate sources of power generation that we're considering and we will be implementing, including a diesel generator, which I think is the most important thing for a large-scale operation. It can back up a solar system. It can run on biodiesel if you're creating biodiesel. And once a diesel engine is started, you can literally have a bypass that goes directly into the crankcase that once it's reached temperature will run on almost any oil, including vegetable oil. Once the engine started, you turn off the diesel fuel and you turn on the waste oil, and it will continue to run on almost anything. You just have to flush the system at the end. So a diesel generator and biodiesel capacity, meaning you're manufacturing it on site, is critical. Also stockpiling fans. Solar panels that we're using are so efficient that even on full cloud days here, they operate at 80%. It's amazing. So I think even if we have a nuclear winter with a VEI-7 that's cloudy for 3 years, solar systems in areas that have 100% solar rating, like Arizona and where I am, will still be completely functional. It's the batteries that fail in 8 years.
Right.
Now, beautifully, Edison iron batteries have recently become financially viable. You need to have a lot of money to procure these batteries, but they last forever. They work on an electrolyte that's completely safe and replaceable, and they have no degradation. So you can get a battery now for a 10-kilowatt solar system that will last forever for about $35,000.
Ooh, that is a little chunk of change, but at least the option is available. I didn't think it was.
Yeah, Edison Iron is the company. It was invented by Thomas Edison. The technology has been around since the turn of the century. The batteries were impractical because they're very heavy. So a single battery for a 10-kilowatt system could weigh 8 tons. So you have to have a special floor, reinforced concrete floor to install the battery, and special equipment to move it around if you need to.
But they'd be rather difficult to steal, sounds like to me.
Oh, you cannot steal it, no. And if you are a millionaire and you invest right and you stockpile a whole bunch of these, you could literally be responsible for powering the new world.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah. So there'd be a really good bartering item if you wanted to take your entire 401k and buy something. You could buy $300,000 worth of these batteries.
Well, I'll have to look into these. That sounds pretty amazing there. That makes everything else possible.
Now let me talk about your area, about the volcanoes that will be erupting in the near future.
Oh, please do.
200 years ago, and we now have, this is all new geologic evidence because we've done a lot of work up there. We know that Mount Baker, Mount Glacier, Mount Rainier, and St. Helens were all erupting in the Dalton Minimum.
Mm-hmm.
St. Helens erupts pretty regularly. It erupted before that and hundreds of times during the mini ice age. So Mount St. Helens is your biggest risk. It can erupt up to VEI 4 or 5, which is what happened in May. So you should never experience more ash than that from Mount St. Helens. But there's also Mount Hood. Are you near there?
I'm not so sure that it's closer. I'd have to actually look at a map. Oh, Bruce is going to look at that for me.
Yeah, so Mount Hood also has historically erupted twice during the Dalton Minimum and after, near the Centennial Minimum. And then in California, Shasta and Lassen are active.
Was it on your site that I saw a whole line of volcanoes that had erupted?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that they go right through Oregon, if I remember correctly. And like I said, we're on the very coast. But if they are closer than Mount St. Helens, it depends on which way the wind is blowing.
Oh, if you're on the coast, you're safe. As long as you're between the coast and the volcanoes, you're fine.
Okay. Well, we did get, even here, we got a slight dusting from Mount St. Helens.
Yeah, because you can have back patterns, but the people that are east of the volcanoes should move. Now, if you're in a coastal position, you want to be out of tsunami range. So I would suggest at least 800 feet above sea level, and that if a tsunami was coming, to quickly be in an area where you could get to 2,000 feet.
Yeah, there isn't any quickly. We would have to go down in the tsunami zone. My house is the only one out of it, but it's not that high. It's like 100 feet above. But I live right next to a hill that I think it's about 800 feet. It might even be 1,000.
Yeah, it's over 1,000.
But that's my closest chance to get up that. Otherwise, I'm out on the road for a while.
There's no evidence that if it was a Cascadia rupture, that it could a wave could get much higher than a few hundred feet. Now, a different propagation wave could, but a local major fault in the Cascadia probably wouldn't cause a tsunami that could get much more than a few hundred feet.
Well, our thing is, if we feel the shaking, that's our tsunami warning. And
Run.
Yes. Well, I can load my car. I've got totes packed. I can load my car in less than 5 minutes. And
it's good to have a weather radio and when you leave there to see what's going on.
Right. And all I've got to do is cross a little road here and go up the hill. And if I can't, I can grab a few things and run up it if I had to. But that's 15 minutes, they say, before it would hit. So I really don't have time to try to go anywhere else. And maybe I could be in a little better spot somewhere. But so far, I've lived here for the last decade and a half, and I haven't found a better spot right off the bat. And there's no for sure safe spot. I mean, you just do the best you can with where you are, and I think it's
prepared to react.
Yes, exactly. That's the thing is save yourself and your family, and think of that.
Yeah, feel sorry for the people who didn't heed the warnings.
No kidding. I see these people that, the stories about them going out on the beach and that's a big lesson. And they used to give us warnings all the time. And as young people, we used to go down to watch because we didn't believe them because it never happened. And so we're a little smarter now. But there's a lot of places, when your kids go to work, they're down in the tsunami zone. I try to always teach them, have an idea where the next highest place is so you can get there if you have to. So that is a constant consideration, and that's why I am always watching earthquakes.
Yeah, there are a lot of studies out there. Preparedness is really something that society is not capable of, that we're very underprepared. When the next major event, whatever it is, happens, the psychological effect on humanity, we don't even know how this event is going to unfold. It is going to be tragic as well as catastrophic, and the more things you can do to eliminate your family from being in harm's way, the better. And the sooner you do that, the better, because there's no way to predict when the next thing that will be the thing that sets it off happens.
Yeah, I think it's just an economical way to live. And there's been many times, we have all kinds of things happen here. The road will flood past us, or a landslide on the other side, or, 2 inches of snow and the whole town shuts down because it's all up and down. And I've been stuck here with the kids when my husband had to work across the states and we were alone, but we were always fine. We had plenty of food, plenty of water, and if the lights are off, we just had to heat one room somehow, and we've pretty well figured out, the basic easy stuff. But, when you're talking something like the Ice Age like you are, that's a whole different level.
Yeah, well, we're seeing the effects right now, and it's very obvious. In a global warming world, we now have this nor'easter after nor'easter, millions of people. We now are still 600,000 without power. In the areas they predicted 10 inches of snow, 33 fell.
Hey, hold on to that thought. Guys, we'll be right back with finish up the show. Hang in there. This is Region X Radio.
Oh.
With SRN News, I'm Keith Peters in Washington. President Trump has delivered on a major campaign promise by taking steps to impose tariffs on some foreign imports.
Surrounded by steel workers, the president signed proclamations to slap 25% tariffs on steel imports and 10% tariffs on imported aluminum. He said he made the move because American workers have been betrayed.
But that betrayal is now over.
And the president argued that the U.S. is simply seeking a level playing field.
We just want fairness.
There will be exemptions for Canada and Mexico, among some other countries. Greg Clugston, the White House.
Not all Republicans are on board, however. Senator Ben Sasse told CBS this morning tariffs are a terrible idea.
It doesn't make sense of where we are in economic history. Tariffs always hurt us. Ultimately, nobody ever wins a trade war. Both sides lose a trade war. Trade is indisputably good for America. It's good for consumers on both sides of every trading relationship.
Britain's top domestic security official on Thursday described the attack on a former Russian spy and his daughter with a rare chemical agent as a brazen and reckless act that will be answered without hesitation when the facts become clear. Correspondent Charles de Ledesma reports British Home Secretary Amber Rudd says the probe into the nerve agent attack on the Russian ex-spy and his daughter is focusing on a number of locations, his home, a pub, and a restaurant.
Rudd says enormous resources are being directed at trying to figure out who may be responsible for the poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter. Rudd won't say if she believes Russia's behind the alleged attack, but says Britain will, if it is appropriate, attribute it to somebody.
The pair was found unconscious on a bench in the southwestern English city of Salisbury on Sunday, triggering a police investigation led by counterterrorism detectives. On Wall Street, the Dow by 94 points to 24,895. The Nasdaq rose 31. The S&P advanced 12. This is SRN News. An Idaho judge says transgender people have a right to change their birth certificates.
Up to now, state officials have refused to alter the legal birth certificates of people who have decided to live as the opposite sex. But Idaho Magistrate Judge Candy Dale has ruled that the state must allow the alterations, saying, quote, a birth certificate with a listed sex that aligns with an individual's gender identity promotes the health, well-being, and safety of transgender people. Michael Harrington, SRN News.
Evangelical Christians are playing a major role in supporting Jewish immigration to Israel. According to a tally by the Associated Press, Israel's Christian allies now fund about a third of all immigrants moving to the country. Israeli charities raise millions of dollars from Christians around the world every year, and evangelicals make up 13% of all tourists to Israel. An Israeli parliamentary caucus works with Christian legislators in many nations to foster support for the Jewish state. This is SRN News. The second powerful snowstorm in a week has clobbered the Northeast.
Parts of New Jersey, New York, and New England got 2 feet of snow and more. The Weather Service's Mark Chenard.
The greatest that I've seen so far is a report in southern Vermont of 33 inches.
Philadelphia got 6 inches. Central Park in New York got less than 3. The storm knocked out power for hundreds of thousands of people. Thousands of airline flights were canceled, train service disrupted, but, says Frank Mullen in Providence, Rhode Island,
It's amazing. It's beautiful. I had to come out and stop and check it out. Loving it.
he talked to WPRI-TV in Providence. I'm Rita Foley.
Health insurer Cigna will spend about $52 billion to acquire Express Scripts, the nation's biggest pharmacy benefit manager. The deal's expected to close at the end of this year. It's the latest in a string of proposed tie-ups as healthcare's bill payers look to grow and gain better leverage to deal with rising costs. More details at srnnews.com. I'm Keith Peters in Washington.
Region X Radio.
And we're back here on Region X Radio with Diamond from the Oppenheimer Project. Man, I was checking out your pictures on the Facebook. You have a beautiful area up there.
Well, thank you.
And so we cut him off with our break, so we need to pick back up there. He's probably got more stuff to say.
So where were we before we went to the break?
talked about the batteries and about getting ready. That's what we're talking about preparing to get ready.
Yeah, you're talking about the tsunami zone, so forth and so on.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh,
Well, I was talking about the nor'easters that are coming in
that's
succession up in New England. We have over 2 million people have been cut off from power in the last 7 days. There are right now over 600,000 people without power, and there are several more storms predicted. It's even predicted to go as low as 42 degrees in southern Florida on March 17th. So I think that what's going to happen quickly this spring is lots of people, millions of people are going to want answers to why there's no global warming. So people like Oppenheimer Ranch Project, Adapt 2030, and Ice Age Farmer, we're going to get a lot of new subscribers, people looking for answers. We all have a different perspective to deliver, and so we attract different genres of people, which is good because the information will get to more people that way. These events are going to, continue on the other side of the globe in increasing ways. So the southern hemisphere, the winter there is already predicted in Australia to be the worst ever. So, and this is just the beginning of the event. So within another year, next winter, I believe that we might start to have global unrest based on the disinformation campaign. We might have a massive amount of people waking up, so to speak, with their heads popping out of their buttocks, like I say on the show, that might drive the insanity.
Well, it could, and it seems to me that any little thing that happens, for instance, this, food shortages will affect the stock market and our money situation, and all it takes is really probably one event after they're already upset to really set things off.
Right, and the financial system is abhorrent, based on all Armstrong economics and all solar cycle dynamics. What everything is pointing to, and I'm just looking at the graphics right now for you, just so I don't get it wrong, is that after August 9th, it's anyone's guess what happens to the stock market. That could be the end of fiat money. We could really see some type of collapse happen there this summer. But there's going to be a massive reset again at the end of spring in the stock market. So that might drive a frenzy. We're talking about double the drop that just happened, maybe more at the end of March. And that could be happening also while inflation is occurring because of these crop losses. So you have food prices soaring, gasoline will be soaring, and then your 401k will evaporate. That might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, as they say.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think that we are involved in the real economy, which is seeds and food and skills and the things that will have real value. Even in the old days when they moved here, which was probably during a solar minimum cycle as well, I've done a lot of reading about it, and their seeds might cost a whole year's worth of food. Even, a couple of seeds might cost them $100, and they would save all their money just to get them. And in the older days, people just don't realize that this has happened before, and it's quite possibly going to happen again.
It's definitely going to happen again because time is not linear. It's cyclic. History will repeat itself. In this case, all information, including scientific and historic, is leading to a climatic event which will change society as it has every 1,100 years. Now, this is falling closely to something called the Dan-Scott-Ishker cycle, which happened towards the end of the mini ice age, which took us out of that mini ice age Dalton minimum time. And many say if we didn't fall on that Dan-Scott-Ishker, we would have continued to descend, and the modern warm wouldn't have occurred, and none of this technology would exist. So we have another example of how fleeting these empires are. There has never been an example ever in history where an empire made it past one of these, which means in the next 3 decades, this one is also ending.
All of them will be ending, maybe. Maybe a reset, we can get it a little better next time, hopefully. If this is going to happen, we need to look at the positive aspects of it.
Yeah, well, the last time we were in a dark period, it was called the Renaissance. So there's a rebirth of arts and community, and all that stuff happens. So
That'd be a
that's the good
thing.
part.
Yeah.
But everyone else is starving to death all around you. So
well, there's that.
If you can, if you can get by that part of the suffering, that's kind of why I moved to a rural area. There's less people will be responsible for helping out here. There's less turmoil and global unrest that will even be involved out here. We have natural resources, including tons of oil and gas reserves. We could probably figure out how to get them back out of the ground by, starting the pumps back up again. So if you can move, I would suggest that you start strategically locating. I've been talking with Dr. Anita Bailey on my radio program about preparedness. She has 10 degrees. Many are in preparedness and emergency management, and we are under the consensus about, strategic location is the key to surviving and thriving in the future times, whatever they may be, however it unfolds. You need a lot of planning, and if you don't have the money or resources, there's way to find groups that have them.
Right. Well, except for the whole tsunami thing, we're in a good position here for some things. Maybe inland would be a little better, and we actually have some really interesting people that have moved here thinking that this would be the place they believe. And I don't know if that's true, but I think that we're located quite far from any power plants. And like you said, the way the wind is, it usually comes straight in on us or over the top of us, and it carries on east. So it's not like it's going to blow a volcano that's happening east of us this way, though it can. Like when we had those forest fires, it kind of created its own little weather, and it was real still here, no wind, and it went out in the ocean in just a big circle and came back around on us, even when the fires were at least a couple hours away. So you never know for sure if it's okay. And other than that, I just think a little more inland might be a little safer as far as, things like tsunamis.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But these catastrophes, forest fires and everything, these are naturally occurring things that are part of the natural life cycle that actually add to fertility on the earth.
I believe that's true, but I'm not sure that's the case this time. I think that it was a lot of poor management and perhaps some sabotage.
Oh, that could be correct. But what you need to protect is your home, because in the coming times, if there's no infrastructure and your house burns down, there's no Home Depot to buy more wood.
No, that's for sure. And I do agree with you that being strategically located next to a big source of wood is a good idea. Or, and to have near sources of water. We actually live on the biggest little city on the coast. It's about 40,000 here. We're right next to North Bend, too, and they're like the same thing. So there's a little bit of population, but I kind of think people are going to get scared and want to leave. And if anybody shows up here, which I don't think they will, the only thing they're going to do here is probably evacuate people, and I'm not going, so that's not going to happen. And if we can get inland and we think that's a better idea, we might do that. We know people there. They're a little more rural, and people around here are like where you are. They're used to pretty much taking care of themselves unless they're, from California or the big city or something like that. And I just don't think those people will have any interest once the weather starts acting up on staying here, perhaps. It might run some people off. I'm hoping anyway.
They'll need to go somewhere and look for the cable connection or the Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi. Got to have the Wi-Fi. So, Diamond, do you think perhaps in 100,000 years, instead of the woolly mammoth with grass in its mouth, it will be the modern-day automaton with a phone in its hand?
Probably not.
So, but
no, we're gonna.
I was going to ask, but on a serious note, with these 1,100-year cycles, one of the interesting things about this one and what's going on right now is our vast amount of technology that we can destroy ourselves with, such as the nuclear arsenal and atomic energy, so forth and so on. Do you see this being a very big problem with contaminating things with this coming forward?
Yeah, it's part of the strategic planning. We have so many nuclear reactors that will not last on backup power forever. So you want to eliminate yourself from areas where there are nuclear reactors because they will melt down. It's amazing how much disinformation there is about Fukushima, and even if it melts down and you're in North America, if you don't eat fish that come from Fukushima, you'll probably be all right in your lifetime. People have really gone a little haywire over toxic waste coming from Fukushima.
I agree with that, but the jet stream right after that happened, though it often comes right onto my town, it went way up north and across to the east. It dipped down in the United States. And it's possible that as far as the finer particles, that they actually got more exposure than we did. Now, of course, the fish, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, but very little of that radioactive material is actually coming through the atmosphere. It's getting sent into the ocean. Because it's leaking underground in the subsurface. But what would happen in a catastrophe like we're going into is you're going to have tens of thousands of nuclear reactors that all melt down. Right. So you need to be far away from those areas. We know from experience, like in Russia, that areas around major meltdowns like Chernobyl, they recover. There's lots of mutation and strange things that occur, but not everything dies. In fact, almost everything survives. We're very resilient. The geologic record shows that things make it through the most intense catastrophes. You know, we're talking like planets hitting us. Somehow life gets to the other side. So this is just a shift in the climate with huge earth changes. So there are going to be pockets, even if everyone else dies, there are going to be pockets that are completely left unharmed. And hopefully you choose the right place to be in that pocket.
I agree. Let's all hope for the best. How close are you to any nuclear power plants?
I don't know of any of them near here. All of the power is generated by burning coal. So we don't have any nukes in this area. We just burn shit. We got all the wood and coal, and we're in the middle of nowhere. So they still have coal-fired power plants all through Arizona and the Four Corners. And that comes out in the rain, and so all the lakes that they make for tourists are all filled with toxic fish. You drive into these parks that says, do not eat the fish, do not touch the fish. If you catch the fish, don't eat any of the fish.
But it's safe. Come on in.
No, my favorite words they tell you don't eat no more than so many ounces of that fish.
4 ounces a year, yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to that 4 ounces.
What a delicious portion.
So do you have on your land up there? Do you have a stream type food source that comes through?
Yeah, we have a very critical river. All the rivers that come from the Continental Divide are critical and allocated to. Just south of here, the Navajo River is all allocated to Arizona. The river I live on, the Blanco, 90% of it is diverted up at the Oso diversion and goes to New Mexico and Arizona. So it's supplying like Albuquerque with all the water that melts off of the Continental Divide. And the rest of it is allocated to the few hundred people that live on the rest of the river, including our ranch. So there's unlimited water resources for the pristine water that's now running through the property, which is guaranteed forever. And in fact, when the shit hits the fan, the river could rise by 9 times if the Oso diversion gets clogged. So then we would have 10 times more water.
A great big lake or ocean.
Yeah. No, it used to run that way, so it would just scour the valley out to its normal size.
I saw, I think it was Randall Carlson, and I watched a couple other local. I was watching his show, and he talks about a lot of the things you're interested in. And another geologist in Oregon, and they were showing how some of the rivers were diverted over the northern part of Oregon, and basically, it rerouted and it scoured it. But that's not going to come to where I live, but it's still just interesting how the dynamics of the weather can really change things or any kind of a catastrophe.
Yeah, and until recently, we didn't believe that any of that was possible. When the Greenland ice cores came up in the last few decades, geologists and climatologists realized that massive climate change can occur on a decadal scale, which means the entire thing can shift in 10 years from completely known to completely unknown. And we are in one of those times, and this is an opportunity to really document these effects and hopefully save them for future generations so that they know what's happening, so that the oligarchs cannot control the population with some nonsense idea that we have to be taxed for.
I think that's a really good point that you make, and I always wonder how come that didn't happen before, that people didn't think we needed this information. And I listened to something that said if you want your words remembered, you have to put them into stone because it's the only thing that will survive time. So maybe we need to start writing on a mountain.
Yeah, clearly this information was known until recently, and what happened in the 1500s and earlier till the 1800s was the complete elimination of all the old information. That was the information about the original sciences of astrology and numerology and cosmology, because they wanted the control mechanism of religion to be boss. If you have a religious control mechanism, doesn't matter how many religions you can have as many as you want, then you have a subservient population which will answer to the master. Unfortunately, that master is made up, and if we could, we will revert back to the original information because it's intuitive. So if we all had just had time to meditate, we would know the answers. But the society is designed to not give you enough time to pollute your pituitary gland so that you have very fleeting moments of clairvoyance, so that you cannot access the Akashic record of all that is known, which has been here forever. The universe has been here for eternity. That's unfathomable.
Well, see, I think that even if you believe in whatever you think is your truth, if everybody believes in that, the governments or whatever group of people want to control everyone else, they're going to infiltrate and use that information, even if it is a good thing. They're going to use it to control you. So I don't think anything's safe.
Yeah, but it's clear that during the empire reset that we revert back to nature. Stone people, the nature people, these are all legends. So there will be a time that we do not have any masters, and we're heading into that time. So
sort of like a constant cyclical building of the Tower of Babylon and it falling.
Yeah, on an 1,100-year periodicity.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Fascinating.
And then you add on to that another level of cosmic catastrophe at 11.5 thousand and 25,000 years. So there's an even bigger catastrophic cycle that perturbs the 1,100-year climate cycle.
Now, these cycles you were talking about, something sort of rang out when you were talking about the amount of years. Does this tie in with, say, I'm not talking about the length of the different kind of epochs in the Mayan calendar?
Yeah, it's all synonymous.
Okay.
So even at the Yuga cycle would be the long count calendar according to the Mayans.
Okay.
The time frames have been a little skewed, and I think that there's arguments. There's no need to argue over it. What happens is there's a cosmogenic effect that is the precession of the equinoxes. It's a 26,000-year clock that can be broken down into quarters. So there's a 4,600-year cycle. There's an 11.5 cycle. That there's cosmogenic catastrophic events of different types that occur time immemorial on this. It's where the Iron Cross comes from. The Iron Cross is the quartering of the great year. A lot of people call the Ankh, and that symbol that they wear as an emblem. It's representing the four intersections of the 26,000-year precession of the equinoxes. We're falling on the midpoint of the halfway, which is a cosmic catastrophe event or a sea level fall event. It's also called the Heinrich event. So if you just want to Google Heinrich event, that's historically what happens on this cusp, and we're on that point, the lower part of the X of the Iron Cross. And that is based on historical information.
So we probably, you know of quite a few of the cycles that we have, but we probably could have cycles that are so long that we're not even aware of them because, you know, the universe is fairly timeless and has been around for a while, and there's been, I mean, we can look and find things that have happened, but if we've had a lot of catastrophes on the Earth, I kind of wonder if, you know, our latest ones haven't covered up information about the previous ones. And
we're also on the 100,000 year maximum eccentricity of the Milankovitch cycle in the next few decades. That comes in 2024. So we're also on a 100,000 year cycle boundary. We are also on the mass extinction boundary, which is the 64 million year mass extinction cycle. We're also sitting right on that cusp.
how many millions of years is that?
The 64 million year mass extinction cycle.
64
The last
million
one
years.
was the dinosaurs, and now we're there. We're waiting for the next one. And that is based on cosmogenic effects, so it's usually a massive impact every 64 million years.
Right, and we're actually set up for that more, aren't we, with our weakened magnetosphere and everything? It isn't
any large
protecting us.
object that would come near us would get sucked into us as opposed to deflected.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, we're like a magnet.
Big target practice time. Diamond, we're about to come to the end here, and I don't want you to get cut off at the end. Could if you can plug your website? I know you were talking about your radio show. You're over on Freedom Slips, right?
Freedomslips.com on Wednesday nights, this same time slot.
Same time slot. Cool.
Yeah.
And your website, it's oppenheimerproject.org, as well as
It's Oppenheimer Ranch Project is the title on YouTube, and our website you can get to oppenheimerranch.org or freecanyons.org. We're listed on the Worldwide Organization of Organic Farms at Three Canyons. We're listed on HipCamp. But you can find all those links on our website, so just go to threecanyons.org. And if you Google Oppenheimer Ranch Project, you can find our Patreon page and everything you need. It's not that hard if you know how to use Google.
I know how to use Google.
Indeed. Sometimes Google.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you guys. I just wish we didn't have that connectivity issue, because I have connectivity issues with my radio show coming from the middle of nowhere here.
You understand the frustration. Then I appreciate you coming on tonight.
You can always come back.
Yeah, it's been a learning experience. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, if you ever want me back, just give me advanced warning, and let's do it.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks, Diamond.
It's been a pleasure.
You too, sir. Have a good evening.
You do.
All right, guys, we are coming. We got about a minute left, and I'm not going to say who we're going to have as our guest tomorrow because it's sort of in transition. I'm not sure if we're going to have it. Might be Monday. So we'll see.
So it'll be a surprise.
It'll be a surprise. It'll be a surprise, but thank you very much, Diamond, for coming on tonight. I like that. I feel like I was in a classroom.
I know. I've learned stuff.
Indeed. And that's what we all have to get to, is where we start learning things. If, like this dog over here learning to hush. But no, if we don't start embracing, getting rid of our ego and embracing these things, we are going to end up like that woolly mammoth. But like I said, a little device in our hands, frozen in place, man.
And we have to help each other because, if we don't help our neighbor, then they're going to be looking towards us for saving them. And we want them to be part of the process.
So many things, even when you learn so many things, like, he brought to the table tonight, it just keeps bringing up so many questions. You never have enough time with this. It always brings up so many questions of, the concept. I know we're almost done here, but the concept of, the whole caveman concept. Maybe, did that evolve from at this time, at one time, this was the way you had to be?
Yeah, maybe that's why they're from the caves. It wasn't because they were so backwards. It was because that was the best place to survive.
That's where you had to survive. So, well, guys, there it is.
Good night.
We'll see you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I almost took a time warp there. We'll see you.